Right then team, today we're going to go through the high bar back squat. The first thing you want to think about is how high the bar is in the rack. And to make sure the right height, we just want to make sure that when we put our arm over it, we don't have to go on our tiptoes because the bar will be too high. And we don't want the bar to be down here by our lower part of our ribs. The reason if it's too low, we'll have to go into a squat to even stand the bar up. And if it's too high, when we're putting the bar back, we're going to have to go on our tiptoes to get the bar back in. The next thing you want to think about when setting yourself up for a back squat is making sure your hands are in the right position. And a good way to do that is there are lines on the bar, and there is also a part where it goes from smooth to rough. You can put your thumb out from where it goes from smooth to rough to make sure you're equal, and you can put both hands there. I like to use the rings and kind of just make sure that my hands are equal on the bar. Does not necessarily matter how wide or how close. The closer you are, the tighter your back's going to be able to get. But if you have poor shoulder mobility, you're going to have to go a bit wider on the bar. Once my hands are in position, I just like to make sure that as I'm coming in under the bar and under the rack, that I'm almost squeezing my shoulder blades and almost pulling my elbows back and down. So then when I set up, I have this nice shelf to sit the bar on. The next bit we're going to go through is the walkout. So once you've got the bar in the right height and you've got your hand position correct, we're going to get in under the bar. Like I said, we're going to pull those elbows back and down to create that shelf. Press our legs out, stand tall. We want to keep our core tight. So take a big breath in, core tight, and go one leg after the other to take your step back. To find your foot position, it's going to be different to everyone, but you just want to go where it feels comfortable. For most people, that is going to be just outside of hip width, and that's going to be toes slightly pointed out. The reason we do this is if our toes are pointed straight, the squat's going to be all forward and back. We're not going to have much room to drop down into. Whereas if I bring my toes out a little bit, I'm in this angle, my knees can go out over my toes, I can get into a much lower position. A really good rule of thumb is like wherever you are for just like a bodyweight air squat, for example, when you go into like a goblet squat, you're going to have to go a tiny bit wider because you have a weight here. You're going to have to go a little bit wider. When you go into a high bar back squat, you're going to have to go a little bit wider again. And then low bar back squat, a lot of the time, you'll be wider again. So it's kind of like it all depends upon the movement and depends upon what's right for you. Foot stance typically is going to be when you look down at your feet, they want to be just outside of hip width. We want to make sure that our knees travel over our toes. So before we go anywhere in a squat, we're going to try and rotate our legs so our toes are pointing, our knees are pointing over our toes. And we just want to make sure that when we go down, we have an equal weight spread out across every different point of our foot. So we're not too much on our toes and we're not too much in our heels. And a really good way to think about this is a tripod foot. So if you think of on your feet, you have your heel, you have your pad of your big toe and you've got your little toe. When I set myself up, I'm just making sure that I've got contact with all of those 3 points on both feet. So we're going to go through the whole sequence in motion so you can see what it looks like and you can kind of follow along if you need to. Find your hand position on the bar and just make sure your hands are equal on the bar. As you step in under, pull those elbows back and down to kind of create that shelf. Get into that little quarter squat position, take a big breath in, tense your core, stand up nice and tall. Take a step backwards, 1 to 2 steps to try and find your squat position. And then take your feet out into where is comfortable. Before I go into the squat, I'm going to take a big breath in, tense my core. Imagine I'm going to get punched in the stomach, nice and tight. Hips and knees go at the same time, knees go out over toes, find my depth, press through both of my feet equally on the way back up. So keep the control down, knees go out over toes, stand nice and tall. And then when you walk the bar back in, keep your core nice and tight, all the way back in, slam the bar into the rack, and then make sure you're down both sides. So I want to quickly talk about when you should be using different bits of equipment. So you may see powerlifters or even strongmen or some other lifters using things like belts, some squat shoes, and knee sleeves. When are you going to want to use each of them? So lifters will be dictated by a few things. If you have really poor ankle mobility, or for some reason your knees just simply won't travel over your toes, potentially using lifters is a good idea. I would always recommend and try and advise people to start to increase their ankle mobility. When it comes to things like belts, for example, belts are actually going to be started to use, I would recommend, when you start to get around the territory of like 2 times body weight lifts. What we don't want to start to do is rely on equipment rather than relying on our body. So I would always think about it as goal dependent on whether you use a belt or not. If you are training to be a powerlifter, you are training to lift the most maximal amount of weight, If you're trying to do that, then you're going to want to use the equipment that allows you to do that. If you are someone who's going to the gym to build muscle, you want your muscles to do the work, so you don't necessarily want to use the equipment. So things like knee sleeves, for example, you will see me squat my strength movements, my low bar back squat, my high bar back squat with knee sleeves and a belt. But when I go into any machine work, leg press, belt squat, pendulum squat, I don't have any knee sleeves. And the reason I do that is because I want my muscles to do the work. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Charlie. This is Hack the Body, Hack the Mind. We will see you on the next one.